So welcome back to another episode of Will It Go Through in NHL 16. Today we'll be highlighting all the trades from Trade Center 2016 on the NHL Trade Deadline. So this 2016 Trade Deadline was underwhelming to say the least. It was not really good at all. So I'll be just highlighting the best trades of the day, which is only a few, but I'll get through them on NHL 16. So the first major trade at Trade Center 2016 was obviously the Boedker trade to Colorado. So obviously Arizona traded Boedker to the Colorado Avalanche for Alex Tanguay, Connor Bleakley, and Kyle Wood. So the one question is, will this trade go through in NHL 16? And it doesn't. Trade rejected. The Colorado Avalanche had this great thing called a trade block. You should check it out. Based on what you're asking us to cough up, it seems you haven't, so you better be willing to give us something outstanding. I don't see that though. Your offer to us is filling needs we have, but the value just isn't where it needs to be, all compared to what we're being asked to give up. So it doesn't work on Arizona's end. Let's see if it works on Colorado's end. So if you don't remember, Connor Bleakley was the Colorado Avalanche's first round pick in 2014. I think he was drafted like 23rd overall or 16th. Let me check it out. 23rd overall, 2014. He's got high elite potential, 19 years old, 66 overall. And let's see if the trade goes through on Colorado's end. Trade rejected. The Arizona Coyotes had this great thing called a trade block. You should check it out. Based on what you're asking us to cough up, it seems you haven't, so you better be willing to give us something outstanding. I don't see that though. You aren't where we need to be in value offered, nor are we particularly interested in what you're sending us. So, the trade does not work in NHL 16 both ways. Surprised about that. Let's go on to the next trade in Trade Center 2016. So the next biggest trade on Trade Deadline was obviously the Kris Russell trade between the Dallas Stars and the Calgary Flames. So you're probably wondering who the heck this guy is. Well, the trade, if you take it with Kris Russell, it doesn't go through because too many players in Calgary's organization. So I basically just went on here and took the guy at the lowest trade value, which is this guy. I don't know how to say his name, and that's how it's just going to work out. So obviously Calgary Flames are giving up Kris Russell, defenseman. He's actually pretty good, 85 overall in this game. Good defenseman, but he's an unrestricted free agent after this year. So Calgary's not really a contender anymore, so they're just trying to give up and get prospects. So obviously Calgary gives up Kris Russell to the Dallas Stars for Jyrki Jokipaka. I think that's how you say his name. Great NHL rookie though. He's been playing well for Dallas. Brent Pollock and a Dallas Stars conditional second-round pick. I just think it might be 2016 just based on what Calgary is asking for. But the one question is, will it go through in NHL 16? And the trade is rejected. The Dallas Stars had this great thing called a trade block. You should check it out. Based on what you're asking us to cough up, it seems you haven't, so you better be willing to give us something outstanding. I don't see that through. Your offer to us is filling needs we have, but the value just isn't where it needs to be, all compared to what we're being asked to give up. So the trade doesn't work on Calgary's end, but will it work on Dallas's end? So I got the trade loaded up in Dallas's end, and so I obviously had to add in that other guy on the Calgary's end, so we would go through. But the question is, will it go through on Dallas's end? Trade accepted. I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth, as it were, so Calgary gladly accepts this particular proposal of yours. That was weird, but it works on Dallas's end, but it doesn't work on Calgary's end. Let's move on to the next trade. So the next big trade on Trade Center in 2016 was obviously the Eric Gelinas trade to Colorado from New Jersey. So Colorado gives up a third-round pick in 2017 to the New Jersey Devils in exchange for defenseman Eric Gelinas, 24 years old, drafted in the second round in 2009. But we got to go and add one more skater into this, probably the lowest potential guy, just to make this go through. So we'll get this guy. There you go. So we got this trade loaded up on Colorado's end. One question is, will it go through? Trade rejected. I question whether you even looked at a trade block surplus. New Jersey is totally unwilling to give up what you've asked for, unless you really make it worth our while. I don't think you have. The value of what you were asking us to take just doesn't snuff up at all, and it doesn't match our block needs particularly well either. So this trade does not go through in Colorado's end, but the question is, will it go through in New Jersey's end? Okay, so we got this trade loaded up in New Jersey's end, and obviously we have that one guy in Colorado, the lowest potential player, least trade potential, on Colorado's end. But the question is, will this trade go through? Trade movement, okay. Trade accepted. The Colorado Avalanche fans will be cheering in the streets when we announce this deal. I'll take deals like this any day of the week. So this trade was outstanding for Colorado, it looks like. And it looks like New Jersey is the loser in this trade, at least on NHL 16. So we'll move on to the next trade. So the next biggest trade on Trade Center in 2016 was obviously the Lee Stempniak trade. So New Jersey obviously traded Lee Stempniak to the Boston Bruins for a 2017 second-round pick and 2016 fourth-round pick, And I had to add in the lowest trade value player on Boston, so that way this trade will go through. Because otherwise Boston has less than 50 skaters in the organization. But one question is, will the trade go through? Trade rejected. Boston could live with what you're asking us to send your way. We're glad you're paying attention to our trade block surplus. That said, what you're offering us in return, it just isn't very interesting. It doesn't meet our block needs all that well, and the value just isn't there whatsoever. So the trade doesn't work on New Jersey's end, but will it work on Boston's end? So get the trade loaded up on Boston's end, obviously that low trade value player on their end, just to make it go through. So the question is, will it go through on Boston's end? Okay. Trade accepted. Well, this is an absolute no-brainer for us here in New Jersey. I'm going to accept this deal before you change your mind about it. So, it appears it's a steal on NHL 16 for New Jersey Devils, which I guess it is, kind of. You're giving up a second-round pick and a fourth-round pick in 2 draft years for basically a rental player. So, I say it's a good trade for New Jersey, but we'll see in the playoffs. Let's go on to the next trade. Okay, so the next biggest trade on Trade Center in 2016 was obviously the Vivante Smith-Pelle trade between Montreal and New Jersey. So obviously Montreal gave up right wing Vivante Smith-Pelle, DSP, to the New Jersey Devils in exchange for Stephane Matteau. Looks like Stephane Matteau is their first round draft pick in 2012, where DSP was acquired from Anaheim in exchange for Yuri Sakak, who I think is on the Blackhawks now. I think he got sent down waivers, but anyway, so the one question is, will this trade go through in NHL 16? Trade rejected. The New Jersey Devils have this great thing called a trade block, and you should check it out. Based on what you're asking us to cough up, it seems you haven't, so you better be willing to give us something outstanding. I don't see that though. The value of what you're asking us to take just doesn't snuff up at all. It doesn't match our trade block needs particularly well either. So this trade is rejected on Montreal's end. It looks like it's one-sided with the trade value, but we'll go check it out on New Jersey's end, see if it'll go through. Okay, so we got the trade loaded up on New Jersey's end. It looks like Stephane Matteau's one of New Jersey's top prospects. Because if you look at his trade value, he's up there with Camilleri, Adam Larson, Damian Severson in a way. So let's see if this trade will go through on New Jersey's end. Trade accepted. Well, this is a no-brainer for us here in Montreal. I'm going to accept this deal before you change your mind about it. So it appears to be a steal for Montreal in NHL 16. But let's move on to the next trade. Okay, so the next biggest trade in Trade Center in 2016 was obviously the Jamie McGinn trade between Buffalo and Anaheim. So, Buffalo gives up forward Jamie McGinn in exchange for a conditional third-round pick to Anaheim. So, the deal with this conditional third-round pick is that it turns to a 2017 second-round pick if the Anaheim Ducks win 2 rounds in the playoffs this year and Jamie McGinn plays more than 50% of the Ducks playoff games this year. If they don't win 2 playoff rounds, and then basically it stays a third in 2016 out of this. So the question is, will this trade go through in NHL 16 on Buffalo's end? It does. Trade accepted. Well, this is an absolute no-brainer for us here in Anaheim. I'm gonna accept this deal before you change your mind about it. So it appears to be a steal for Anaheim on Buffalo's side. But let's check on Anaheim's side of this trade. Okay, so I got this trade loaded up on Anaheim's end. So basically, the guaranteed third-round pick is going to Buffalo for Jamie McGinn. Let's check if this trade will go through on Anaheim's side. Trade rejected. The Buffalo Sabres are pretty neutral to what you're asking us to give up. But honestly, it doesn't thrill us at all, but we can live with it, depending on what you send our way. And with that said, your offer to us is filling needs we have, but the value just isn't where it needs to be, all compared to what we're being asked to give up. So this trade works on Buffalo's side, but doesn't work on Anaheim's end. Let's move on to the last trade of the deadline. So the last trade in Trade Center in 2016 was the Nicholas Backstrom trade between Minnesota and Calgary. So Minnesota gave up Nicholas Backstrom and a 6th round pick in 2016 in exchange for David Jones and had to throw in a goalie with the least amount of trade value just so that way I can make it go through, or at least I can make it league approved. So the one question is, will it go through? Trade rejected. Got to be honest with you, Calgary is not too thrilled parting ways with what you're asking us to send your way. But you aren't completely off base. However, what are you offering us in return isn't very interesting. It doesn't meet our block needs all that well. The value just isn't there whatsoever. So this trade doesn't work on Minnesota's end, but the question is, will it work on Calgary's end? Okay, so load up the trade on Calgary's end, and this Nicholas Backstrom situation is really weird. So the process in order to get Nicholas Backstrom on the Minnesota Wild is that I had to go on Calgary, I had to sign him as a free agent. I had to go first get rid of some contracts, but first I signed him as a free agent. Then I had to go trade him to Minnesota for a goalie prospect. I got him traded to Minnesota, and now I can finally get him traded back to Calgary on here. So I got David Jones, and I had to throw another extra goalie just so I can get this trade to go through. And then I got Nicholas Backstrom on here, a 6th-round pick in 2016, and I had to throw in another low trade value forward, the least amount of value on the team, in order to make this go through, or at least work. So the question is, will this trade go through in NHL 16, at least on Calgary's end? Trade rejected. I've got good news and bad news. The good news is that you've crafted a proposal. In other circumstances, the Minnesota Wild would be inclined to agree is a fair market deal for what you are after. Now the bad news. The need we're looking to fill isn't dire enough that we'll be willing to absorb the contract of David Jones. So the trade does not work on Calgary's end, and the trade does not work on Minnesota's end. So that was the Trade Center 2016 episode, at least with the biggest trades on Trade Center 2016. There wasn't really that many good trades today, but those were the best of the best on NHL 16. So make sure to like and subscribe for more of these next year, because I can't really do any more because trade deadline's over. Maybe you could do something to do with playoffs. But anyway, make sure to like and subscribe for more, and thanks for watching, and I will see you later.